This is Troy with Bigwater UAV, and we are Quadmafia. And this is my FPV cinematic tip of the week. Wanted to talk to you about, yes, I got footage playing in the background. Wanted to talk to you today about your cinematic camera settings for your GoPro specifically. I know action camera basically be the same, but for your GoPro and what I use to get professional cinematic FPV footage. So we'll take a look over here at our GoPro Hero 12 and talk about the settings that I use, the most important settings. Typically, I shoot 8.7, 5.3K, 24 frames per second. That gives me that smooth, buttery footage. It gives me great motion blur. I run that at, again, here are my settings. I run a standard profile. I do not run log. I've had problems with log. 10-bit, 5.3, 8.7. That gives you, when you crop into 16.9, it gives you the full camera sensor to use. Again, 5.3. I run 24 frames per second because my cinematic flow, I do not need to slow it down in post. If you need to slow something down in post, you may want to run 60, and the only way to do that is to run 4K. But I run 5.3. I use the wide lens. Hyper smooth off. It's important to have hyper smooth off because you're going to do your stabilization in post. For capturing, pretty much standard, and this is your Pro Tune. So your shutter, it's very important to follow the 180 rule to get great motion blur, and I run that at 1/48. Right now I've got an ND filter on this GoPro, and that's why you're not seeing any footage. Your white balance, I set and lock that depending on the conditions. I would not recommend it running auto. You can adjust it in post. Because if you're flying along and you get clouds and such, your white balance is going to change. And you don't want that happening in your footage. So lock that down. 5500 would be a good starting point for regular daylight footage. Your ISO min and max, I lock that at 100. But you can, if you're flying into a building, raise your ISO up and maybe bring that up to 400. But again, normally I set it locked. Sharpness I run low because GoPros have a lot of sharpness in them to begin with. Color profile I run flat. I set the color and the saturation levels in post. And that is pretty much it of how I run my GoPro and set it up for cinematic footage. One of the most important things, of course, with any FPV cinematic type footage is ND filters. I've got an ND 16 on this for pretty low light conditions outside. I run anywhere, and I use a mixture of Freewell and camera butter. I run between an ND8 and an ND64. What that does, it allows you to follow the 180 rule. Typically, if I'm doing any cinematic footage, for instance, for a golf course, etc., I'm running a test flight to look at my footage just to see if I need to make any adjustments. But once you do that, you pretty much know what your settings are going to be. The other important thing with cinematic FPV footage is to make sure you hit the record button. Anyways, this is Troy with Bigwater UAV. You're watching the Quadmafia channel, and this has been my FPV tip of the week. I'll be back in a future episode to give you some more cinematic FPV tips. Thanks for watching. Peace. Remember, FPV is not a crime. Running bad camera settings is. Later.